You are 22 years old, stranded on a rocky island off the coast of Italy, when soldiers arrive with orders from your husband. Not a letter, not a divorce settlement. Orders. A few weeks earlier, you were Empress of Rome. Crowds shouted your name in the streets. Now you are trapped on Pandateria, surrounded by sea, with nowhere to run. Your husband is Emperor Nero, and he wants to marry someone else. Rome has already accused you of adultery. The evidence is terrible, mostly because it does not exist. Unfortunately, when the emperor wants you guilty, evidence becomes more of a decorative item. First, one correction. Ancient Rome did not have a formal harem like the later Ottoman court. Roman emperors had wives, mistresses, concubines, enslaved women, freedwomen, attendants, and enormous households packed with people whose safety depended on the mood of someone above them. So if you imagine a locked palace wing full of royal women, that part is wrong. But if you imagine a wealthy male household where women could be watched, traded, accused, exiled, beaten, or killed depending on their legal status and political usefulness, then yes, Rome could get very ugly very quickly. The first danger was simple. Your body was not entirely treated as your own. For an elite Roman woman, marriage was a family project. It could join powerful houses, produce heirs, repair alliances, or create new ones. Love was welcome, presumably, if it happened not to interfere with the paperwork. A respectable wife was expected to be sexually faithful, manage the household, and protect the family's reputation. Her husband, meanwhile, lived under a rather more creative moral system. Under Augustus, adultery became a public crime. That sounds like moral reform. In practice, it meant the state had entered the bedroom carrying legal documents. A convicted adulterous woman could face divorce, loss of property, and exile, and Augustus demonstrated how serious he was by using the law against his own daughter, Julia. Julia was not some anonymous Roman caught sneaking through a back door. She was the daughter of the emperor. She had money, status, famous relatives, and probably the worst possible father to disappoint during a morality campaign. Ancient writers accuse her of multiple affairs and scandalous behavior. The exact details are tangled in hostile sources and political gossip, but her punishment is not in doubt. In 2 BC, Augustus banished her to Pandateria. Imagine the downgrade. One day you are living among marble floors, servants, perfume, dinners, gossip, and the center of imperial power. Then your father sends you to a tiny island because your private life has become a public embarrassment. Her mother, Scribonia, went with her. Julia remained under restriction for years and was later moved to Rhegium in southern Italy. She never returned to her old life. Rome called this discipline. Julia probably had another word for it. But exile was the polite punishment. For enslaved women inside Roman households, there was often no legal shield worth speaking of. A domestic slave might dress her mistress, arrange her hair, carry jewelry, wash clothing, care for children, serve wine, or sleep close enough to hear conversations that could get everyone killed. She was also property. That changed everything. Roman sources and law make clear that enslaved women could be subjected to corporal punishment and sexual exploitation. A free elite woman might fear scandal or exile. An enslaved woman might fear the whip, sale, separation from children, sexual coercion, or being sent into harsher labor. And there is something especially grim about household slavery because the danger lived indoors. The person who controlled your food, work, body, and future might be sitting 10 feet away eating breakfast. Even freedom did not always erase that past. A freedwoman could remain tied to her former owner through obligations to a patron. Rome loved turning dependence into a lifelong subscription service. Then there were accusations. In an imperial household, an accusation did not need to be fair. It needed to be useful. Claudia Octavia learned that. She was the daughter of Emperor Claudius and the wife of Nero. By Roman standards, this should have made her extremely safe. Instead, it made her extremely valuable. Nero wanted Octavia gone. He divorced her, first blaming her for not producing a child. Then came accusations of adultery. According to Tacitus, Her female servants were tortured for evidence. The charge failed to become convincing, but convincing was not really the goal. Octavia was sent away. The people of Rome protested, and for a moment that looked like good news, it was not. Popular support simply made her more dangerous to Nero. She was eventually sent to Pandateria, the same island used against Julia decades earlier. Then the soldiers came. Ancient accounts describe an execution made to look like suicide. Octavia's death became one of the ugliest examples of what happened when imperial marriage turned into imperial inconvenience. She was about 22, and somehow the system still had harsher ideas. Consider the Vestal Virgins. They were not members of an imperial household, but they show just how far Rome could go when female sexuality collided with religion and state power. Vestals were among the most honored women in Rome. They tended the sacred fire of Vesta, enjoyed unusual privileges, appeared in important ceremonies, and served for 30 years. They also had to remain virgins during that service. If a Vestal broke that vow, Roman tradition prescribed a punishment designed around a legal religious technicality. Her blood was not supposed to be spilled, so Rome buried her alive. Plutarch describes a chamber near the Colline Gate. A small amount of food and water was placed inside. The condemned Vestal was carried there in a covered litter. She descended into the chamber. The steps were removed. The entrance was sealed with earth. Technically, Rome had not directly killed a sacred woman. It had merely placed her underground with snacks and removed the exit. This was apparently considered an important distinction. Now, stories about Roman women are full of later exaggeration, especially when emperors like Nero are involved. Ancient historians loved scandal, sexual accusations, poisonings, and wicked palace women. Some famous tales are impossible to verify. Poppaea, Nero's second wife, was said by ancient writers to have died after Nero kicked her while she was pregnant. The story is famous, but the exact circumstances are uncertain, and modern historians treat the hostile literary tradition carefully. That matters because Roman history often punishes women twice, first in life, then in the story. A woman at court could be accused of being too sexual, too ambitious, too infertile, too influential, too loyal to the wrong relative, or simply too popular. After she died, writers could turn her into a monster, seductress, victim, or warning depending on what made the better story. And beneath the famous names were countless women, whose names never made it into history at all. That may be the darkest part. Julia at least left a trail in the sources. Octavia had crowds protest for her. Vestal trials shocked the city. But an enslaved maid beaten in a private home, a concubine sold when she became inconvenient, or a servant separated from her child could vanish from the record completely. Rome did not need a formal harem to make women inside powerful households vulnerable. It only needed hierarchy. At the top stood men whose marriages could become government policy. Below them were wives whose private behavior could become a criminal case. Below them were freedwomen still tied to patrons, and below them were enslaved women whose bodies were legally controlled by owners. The rules changed depending on who you were, but the safest strategy was remarkably consistent. Do not embarrass the powerful. Do not become politically inconvenient, and do not assume yesterday's favor will protect you tomorrow. Because in imperial Rome, marble palaces looked permanent. The people inside them were not.